Hello and welcome to the Mindful Man Project. This is where we discuss all the issues and pieces of the puzzle that is mental health. We look at the things in life that get people down or create anxiety in their life and hopefully give some guidance on how to become a modern mindful man or woman. I am your host, Tyson Venables. On today's episode, we have Kyle Emley. Kyle is a teacher, football captain and coach. We chat about his work around his footy club and how he is attempting to change the stigma of men talking about their true feelings. He is also doing great work and things at his school and really just educating the children about it is okay to talk about their feelings, what's going on in their life, and just really holding space for the youth of today. Kyle has had his fair share of ups and downs, but is determined to help more men in his community. Emily, she originally messaged me, she's like, you should interview Kyle. Because especially with what she's saying, how you've implemented some stuff at the footy club and stuff like that for mental health, and just kind of breaking down how you've broken down some of those stigma type. I know for myself, playing rugby and stuff back in the day, you don't talk about it, you literally just
it's difficult.
It's alright, mate, let's just go get a beer.
Correct.
So it's kind of I wanted, she said that you've done some stuff there in the footy club, and the way Mindful Man Project is, it's centered around 4 pillars: mates, muscle, mastery, and mindfulness. So obviously, there's 2 pillars there that really speak to me with what you're doing, mates and muscle, playing footy and stuff. And then obviously, if you're implementing any of that, obviously mastery, you're mastering both your fitness and your skill set on the footy field and whatever.
So many things I can sort of,
like another coach or someone,
absolutely.
How they can then implement that stuff throughout their life, and how they can obviously take it into a change room situation and go, boys, this is what we want to try and roll out, or
correct. It's it's really interesting because I was trying to think about probably at no point sat down. I mean, at the start of the year we had Tomorrow Man come in and run on our pre-season trip, do a information session or run a sort of a workshop on, I guess, modern day masculinity. And that was, I guess, the starting point for me in terms of getting some ideas and looking at this group, how I can, what we can implement, that type of thing. And so when you sort of I never really sat down and went, this is what I'm going to actually do to break down some of those molds. It was now sort of looking back, a lot of it was in the conversations that we had, and then really, I guess, that sort of started the encouragement around vulnerability and allowing these guys to feel comfortable, and me sort of I spent a lot of time at the footy club with the guys, initially, just to try to get to know them and understand what makes them tick and what they do, and I think when I was vulnerable to them, that opened doors for them to be vulnerable back to
a Me Too situation.
Correct, and just completely opening up. I told them about my mental health battles and my relationship battles and my things that you're going through on a weekly basis, and that's just a constant thing. It's not like telling them once and then going, right, now you can share whatever you want with everyone. It's sort of I used it as a sort of a way to sort of try and continually break down those walls with those guys, to sort of that it's not just a one-off, and I'm and if it's obviously if they start to see that it's genuine, and that you're not asking them for advice, you're more just using them as a sounding board. They feel that you trust them, and they start to build that trust with you. I guess it's a two-way street.
Absolutely.
So I think that's where I mean, there's so many examples that I'm in my life of this, people doing it poorly. I look at my work that are just scaling back on the pastoral care system, and really looking at what they're doing, and we've scaled it back from seeing the kids 160 minutes a week to seeing them 60 minutes a week. From a pastoral standpoint, where it's not about curriculum and educating them in the topic or the subject that you're doing. It's more about the actually just sitting down with the kids and that type
Yeah.
of thing. So it is.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a shame, especially when it's like that's the grassroots, and that's the best chance of actually changing what happens through the next generations and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
it's like,
I think for me, like especially I've seen a lot of schools, a lot of independent schools that I've worked at it's a little bit of a boys' club. You know, they're very historic, traditional schools. And I've had staff members talk to me about that as well. But then from a kid's perspective, you're shaping them around the same attitudes that have probably been there for
still around
50
that
years.
stoic male and the
Correct,
shoulders.
Correct, exactly right. And I've run classes. I've had all boys classes where I've run activities around respect towards women and respect towards each other. We've had a class who were just support, like their banter culture, and I think that's similar. That's a male thing. I think it's football clubs, it's schools, it's football clubs, and just we'll give each other a little bit of shit, and then you'll be right. It's just a joke. But I sort of said to somebody once, I'm like, well, it's just a joke. Maybe the first time, and people might have a laugh. But if someone gets with that joke and runs with it for a prolonged period of time, that joke starts to impact on the individual on such a large scale.
Well, it's funny. It's like you say that. Like one of our friends up in Byron, we're at her house for dinner when we're up there visiting, and she was saying that she had her brothers are over for dinner, and she's like he said something and said I'm just joking, and then said it again, and it really upset her. And then I could have reacted, but she didn't. And then the next day she's like, what you were saying last night really upset me.
Yeah.
Like made me really quite sad and upset. And he was just like, holy fuck. And that's the thing, is like women and other people who are subjected to this like banter, it does generally then actually hurt them. And then when someone actually turns around and says, hey, that's hurting me, like, oh shit.
It's interesting, I guess, when I was just thinking about some of the reasons why these type of things happen. I think fear is a huge one, especially for men. And I think fear, like I was thinking about what are people fearful of, and I think fear of failure is a big one, but fear of inadequacy is a huge, and that takes a lot of different forms. If you're looking at you're feeling inadequate in a social situation, you might try to make a joke to try and make yourself relevant in that conversation again.
Yeah, absolutely.
People laugh at you, you get a sense of gratification. It continues on from there. Even in a football club culture, you can feel the same. There's 60 players, and you're just a number sometimes, and something you've got to sort of keep pushing the boundaries to stay relevant within that scenario.
I know. Like when I was playing rugby and I was one of the younger ones playing first grade. So to try and stand out, like I was that wild party kid that was, I went down that road at one point where like at the end of season end of season drinks like Silly Sunday, I ended up hospitalised because I was just like drinking so, I got it all, I can keep up with you boys. 19-year-old trying to keep up with mid-20-year-olds, and they're just like, Next minute I was in hospital on like getting my stomach pumped, and it was like you say, you're trying to find that your place in society.
Where do you fit? And I think that fear of inadequacy flows into relationships, and that's where a lot of it stems. Like the anger can come from that. If you're feeling inadequate in your relationship, then you've got to try and assert, people think they've got to try and assert power or dominance or in some way, and that takes different forms, and I think that's where, it's just in those situations, it's the men who are uncomfortable with them in themselves that are the ones that tend to outwardly show that, whether it's, sadness or aggression or trying to find that dominance or bring themselves back into being adequate. or feeling adequate within any relationship or friendship. And I think for me, like trying to change that banter culture is a huge one, because I think males these days are quite negative in the way that they interact with each other. And I catch myself doing it, you know, and I'm trying to become more conscious of just assessing my actions more and
it's being more aware. Like, even if like that's one of the first steps, is being aware of how you speak.
Correct.
And it's like, oh shit, I'm sorry. Like, or I think that's the thing. Hey, it's like you actually, once you start to become more aware on like what you're saying or how you're saying it, like, oh yeah, no, like I'm sorry. Like,
massively. And from a footy club perspective, it's there's so many different, I guess, parts of that environment that are difficult for young men to juggle, because on one hand, the game itself revolves around, I guess, some sort of aggression.
Yeah.
You know, so you're being asked to go out and be aggressive and tackle to hurt people and sort of walk that sort of fine line between, you know, I guess, physicality and anger, but then playing the game with skill. So it's always, you know, you should look at those aggressive players and they're hard to play against and that type of thing. But then all of a sudden, as soon as the siren goes, you're meant to just go, I'm back to being a lovely person again, which is difficult for some people to be able to do.
Especially as a younger person, you don't have that mental kind of like consciousness on like how this is one thing gets left here, this one gets left here.
And you know, even from my personal perspective, there was you know, in coaching a footy club this year and trying to play at the same time, there was times where I had to sort of I felt like I had to be outwardly aggressive to try and change the course of a game or change the momentum. Correct, lead by example. And I still think about one where I tackled somebody and I grabbed their arm and bent it behind them, you know, just in a moment, just while they were on the ground, to exert some sort of, you know, if I look back on it and analyse it, it was to exert some sort of power or some sort of dominance in that situation. And, you know, the other team got quite angry and was like, you know, that's a dog thing to do. And as soon as I did it and they started doing it, I was like, that's not a good, I'm not in any way, you know, like that. And just that ability, I feel like I'm really learning and trying to be able to, as you say, become aware of my actions in all scenarios. And for me, you know, I think one of my strengths is my ability to communicate. Whereas, you know, to be able to communicate how you're feeling or what you're thinking or your emotions, you need to be aware of them. So that's I think, to scale it right back, you need to be able to be aware. So it's really interesting how I've evolved from this coaching and then from my teaching. And when you say, you know, what am I trying to be, you know, as a coach and a teacher, it's around setting that example. And in no way am I perfect. I've made mistakes. I've looked back at so many, but I think that's when you're continuing to learn. And that feeds back into what I said before about that vulnerability. And I have said to my players, I say to my students, when I make mistakes, and own that mistake, and be like, I think sometimes, especially with kids, you sort of look at the teacher as like all-powerful, knowledgeable person who, when really, when I go and teach new content, I have to go and learn that content again. I spend time researching and going through things and trying to find engaging activities for kids and trying to make content enjoyable. But in no way is it just, there's, you know, no way it teaches us this endless memory or bank of knowledge that no life and all that revolves in it.
Absolutely. And you're also making those mistakes and stuff along the way. And I think that's like sometimes the teachers get so much pressure put on them to be that all-confident, all-knowing, philosopher type of status, but it's like you are still a human.
Absolutely.
And still learning everything as you go. I think and just the way the education system still is, it's kind of still in that industrial age kind of situation.
Massively,
And where those people, like the teachers and stuff, back in that day were like philosophers and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
And it's like now you guys are coming through and it's this new age of learning and showing people, and everybody's learning this new way of going. And it's like cutting the teachers some slack and knowing that they're still humans, they still can make mistakes, but then it's like being vulnerable in that. And
massively. I think, around the education system, I really try to sort of preach, I guess, creativity, because that's what's being lost, and that's what's almost being trained out of kids, because it's sort of like this huge focus on information and like, oh, you must know this and you're working towards getting this score at the end. And I think that setting kids up with habits in terms of their ability to learn is great. I think that's super important. But ultimately, when it comes to any information, they'll be able to jump on their phone and find that. It's about sort of creative ways for them and what works for them for taking on board that information, and then how they can creatively teach others that information. I do a lot of work on, I guess, presenting to the group, oral presentation skills, taking them out of their comfort zone from that perspective. A lot of my assessments sort of revolve around that. Because I think that for them to creatively present information that they've learned, that's, I guess, the next level up, or takes their learning to a deeper level.
It gives them that little bit of a buy-in too, because they're not just repeating verbatim what they're
correct. It's so easy just to copy and paste and reword a couple of things and go, there's my assessment task. I know that information, when they possibly don't know that information. They just moved it from one platform to another. And just so them actually having to think, and I can see it on their faces, there's shit, I've got to go and actually talk about this to people. I've got to run through a training session on a particular fitness component. That means I've got to know about it, and that type of thing. But I guess me trying to showing them that, and it's just about finding that balance between something that's achievable and a challenge, and pushing that out of their comfort zone. And I say that to them often is, my job is to sort of take you out of your comfort zone on a daily basis so that you're continuing to grow. Otherwise, you just sort of stay at the same level. And I'm lucky I work at a school that has some fantastic kids and fantastic resources, and that's probably why I love that environment. As with any school that has any learning environment, any work has its pros and cons. But I think when you start to really focus on the good parts and what you're actually doing, then that makes it enjoyable. So it's interesting, that creativity. It's just, I see so many kids who they're just almost like slowly getting channeled into that same mold. And the ones who are I like that my school has, we have a creative arts centre and a visual arts centre that gets a lot of resources put into it, because those kids are the ones, that they're creative, they think outside the box, they want to, and those type of people are the ones that are ultimately, I think, successful.
Eventually, sure. So. And this is like, they're the ones that you see now in society and stuff, like, they are the ones who are kind of the people who are the outliers at school. It was like, have you ever read like Malcolm Gladwell's The Outliers? That's those sort of people. It's just like those select people that kind of weren't in the clique groups and stuff like that. Those people that were kind of like, and the doers, and they were doing different things, they were trying different things. And if you can try and get most children doing something like that, then the overarching society going forward is going to be a lot more into that creative space, and that you talk about. It's like,
and I think with their ability to be able to create, and it flows into, I guess, confidence, and then confidence allows kids and people and adults even to be leaders. I look back at my childhood, and it was interesting childhood, and I know that we'll probably talk about this a little bit later in terms of like with any advice you can give to your earlier self. But I look back, my childhood was an interesting one. I was like quite an overweight child, and spent a lot of time, and still to this day it impacts you based on. I remember I moved primary schools because of bullying, and not fitting in, and it's like quite funny how people reflect on those actions. I've met people I went to primary school with who have apologised to me for the way that the way that they treat you in those times, and that's something that when you are a teacher now, you see how kids treat each other, and it can be brutal. You know, it is.
You ever find it's like triggering? Like there's been a couple of times where I've been walking down the street and I've seen kids bullying other kids, and it takes me back to that kid that was like in the playground getting kicked at lunchtime and stuff, and it's just like, I just want to walk over there and just grab these bullies and just go, leave them alone. But it's just it's
very difficult. I definitely see myself in a lot of kids I teach. For different reasons. Their interests, their passions, the way that they interact, and you get to know kids really well. You see you see them start to try to be a little bit more vulnerable as well, which is great. And you see the interest for me in education, isn't necessarily more around the teaching of curriculum. It's more around the pastoral care. So I spend a lot of time just sitting in my classroom after a class with a kid who's just decided not to go out to lunch or not feeling comfortable. So they just sit on the computer, and usually a lot of teachers say, "Oh, you got to get out of the classroom," but I'll just sit and do my work in there with them. Maybe not even say anything, but it's a safe space.
And holding
correct.
Space for
And so I still look back at my education as a child, and I remember my the teachers that made a difference for me. And I want to sort of be that in years to come for students. And it's interesting. Recently we lost our footy. I lost a footy final. We lost in extra time. I was devastated, and the club was devastated, and the players were devastated. And when you reflect, back on the season, and I was quite proud of this season. But ultimately, I sort of started to think more about what do I coach for. In our competition, there's 5 divisions, so 5 teams out of 46 win a grand final. So it's difficult, the odds are, it's unlikely. So it's great to win, but similar to my teaching is in 4 or 5 years time, when these 18, 19, 21, 22-year-olds are in their prime and I'm no longer coaching them, I want them to be able to look back and say that, Kyle really helped me, he invested in me, he gave me the best opportunity to improve, both on the field and as a person off the field. And so that is ultimately, I guess you talk about coaching philosophy. That's one of my coaching philosophies. Is just I guess, and that's where it all comes back to, I guess, the goal of what you're doing within this project is getting them to be more mindful and understand, themselves and others. And it's not something that can be changed overnight, but it's, I guess, I like to think of myself is that you are a sum of all of your actions. And same as what you do, you're a sum of all of your actions. So, one mistake doesn't necessarily define you if everything else you're doing is you've got the right intentions. So, for me, that's, I guess, where I'm trying to go. It's
exactly, and I think that's where sometimes also men beat themselves up a bit, with that sort of stuff.
Massively.
They mess up in a relationship, or they mess up something, their finances or something on the footy field or whatever, and then it's just this slippery slope. They keep beating themselves up. It's I like this, just obviously being on my own journey. You now learn to take the learning out of that shit situation.
Massively.
And you're like, okay, cool, that happened.
Mm-hmm.
How am I going to mitigate it not happening again?
Massively,
And is that coming down to me, or is it something else that was another factor? I think that's for men. There's just realizing you need to cut yourself some slack sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then just being in inquiry onto why this stuff's happening, and then being in that inquiry, and then learning how to actually articulate your feelings. Because then that's if you strike someone in a bar or someone like that, it's what the fuck? Why is this coming up? It's obviously because you can't articulate through words
Correct.
what's actually happening.
Yeah.
Just,
bang. And I think in that situation, my opinion is like it's not something that's happened necessarily in that particular space there. It's a build-up.
Yeah.
It's, as you say, it's that constant, possibly negative reinforcement within themselves about certain issues. I should have done this, and anger and emotion builds and builds and builds till there's a release point of some explosive action or word or that type of thing. And you know, it's interesting looking at, I guess, myself. I tend to really try to learn how to control that and to be able to just, you know, what's a release, and football is a release, because you get to go out there and you get to run around and bump into people, and you know, I enjoy that side of things and the competitiveness and the challenge, and that's all great. And I think once you start to find your release for your emotions, because everyone needs to have a sort of vice or a release. Some people listen to music or go for a run or do boxing or you know, that type of thing. So it's interesting you talk about that negative or that self-talk, and probably something that I've really learnt, you know, in the last 12 to 18 months is around manifesting and how, you know, probably scaling that back. There's that positive self-talk. I used to probably be, you know, and my, you know, growing up, my family was very much, I would say, pessimists. I probably justified it by saying I was a realist and looking at ways, you know, oh yeah, well, this is the situation, these are the facts. And I still like to sit back before making decisions and analyse them, write pros and cons lists and really weigh things up. But what I've sort of, the basics of what I've learned around, manifesting is like just that even if I think that something is possible, you know, not possible, it's just to start to think about it. Yeah. And as soon as you start to think about something, you know, you start to see it more and more. And you know, something might pop up in an ad on TV about a car, and then all of a sudden you're seeing that car everywhere. It starts to become front of mind, and it starts to become more, you know, part of your life. And I think that sort of flows into things that you want to achieve in your life. You know, I sort of started coaching kids when I was 19 years old, and loved it, and it's just been a natural progression. And you know, get to 29 and be coaching a senior footy club, and guys who are older than me and guys who are younger than me, and you have a huge responsibility to those individuals around, you know, a huge part of their life. That's for me like a huge, you know, something that I've sort of unconsciously manifested myself to get into that position. And then once you realise that, then you're like, oh, maybe I can manifest bigger things, bigger and better things that I really want, you know, really want to go after, and that type of thing. And that's not to say that it's going to happen, as you say, nothing happens overnight, but it's one of those things. It's like with anything, like one of my previous guests, he used it as like an analogy of like a carpenter first day on the job, apprentice carpenter, doesn't know how to build a house. But over time, and you start to just gradually change little things, and you start to believe things, and you start to really believe it and keep looking at it, keep doing it, those little things then start to build the overarching picture of like what you actually deep down believe in. And then one of my other guests, Steve, he also, it's a deep belief system. As long as you believe in it, like not rather just consciously, I'm gonna be rich. It's correct. Just like actually in your guts know that like this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm gonna do it. This is what I want to do. And eventually like it just starts to happen. Like we're sitting here in my office and I've written stuff up on the walls, and it's literally stuff that I've written down. And I look around, I come in here occasionally, and I go, holy shit, that's happening. I'm doing that. It's manifesting itself. Correct. And I'm not actually physically trying to work for it. It's just like, I know it's happening, I want it to happen. And it just keeps happening. And it starts to become, I guess, a deep part of you. You know, you start to write things down and take ownership for them. And as you say, you're not every day coming in and ticking off a box, and it's not, you know, that like not that stringent, but it's as soon as it's in your consciousness, then it starts to become you as a person. That is you. So for me it's, you know, constant this is not to say that every day I'm like positive, and it's interesting when we talk about that vulnerability, and I've definitely had my share of mental health issues.
Yeah.
I remember when it was 6 months after I first just started to feel really flat, which was probably 2 or 3 years ago. There was I was actually speaking to my friend's dad yesterday, and he talked to me about his, and he's in his 50s, talked to me about his mental health battles over the years. And he described it as, just sometimes I felt like I'd just gone for a swim in the ocean, and then all of a sudden I looked around and there was no land around me. And it was like, you're just trying to swim, just trying to get through, and then a wave would come and hit you, and then you just come back up for air, and then another wave would hit you, and it's
that's a pretty powerful
I think so. Yeah, and that really resonated with me in terms of I have felt that before, and then after a period of time, a bit of encouragement, I decided, I'll go to the GP, I'll go there, and within 5 minutes of being at the GP, 2 or 3 questions, it was like, rightio, there's a prescription for antidepressants, and I was like, I want to explore every opportunity before like that. For me is like the last resource. It's interesting. My family, people in my family have had mental health issues as well. So then, when you're feeling like that, you can start to justify it and say, "Oh, it's genetic," or I'm a product of my environment, or this is just the way it is for me, or that type of thing. So you can maybe make yourself feel better, but it doesn't. It just feeds into that negativity and that negative mindset. So, it takes a long period of time. I still have days where I feel down. I haven't felt like that for a while, which is great. And that's through, I guess, support network. For me, talking about it more, being open about it, and being vulnerable about it, and then helping others who, there's people I play with or coach in footy who, and I didn't meet them until probably October last year, so it's been less than 12 months, and within this year have opened up to me about their mental health battles and the things they're going through, and I'm finding I've been just seeing how common it is for men. And I think for me, opening up initially with them about that has encouraged them to be able to do that.
It's so good, because it's like it just allows, and it's just like you said, like that the kid in the schoolyard or whether it's someone at the footy club is just holding space. You don't have to they'll come to you, or you can even just ask the question if you know they're not being themselves, and then just allowing them to talk it, and just I know the hardest thing as a dude, it's actually articulating how you're feeling. It is. It's like girls can go and go, I'm feeling really upset because I'm tired and cranky for, I don't know why, but it's just happening. That's just why. And it's allow it, and then just kind of start to unpack those thoughts and whatever's going on. You go, I'm tired and cranky because I've had a really fucking rough day. This has happened, this has happened, this has happened. And then eventually it just starts to unpack itself. And I think that's just holding space for your mates and stuff at the footy club and whatever. And it's just
absolutely. And I think, that's something that I try to sort of discuss with people in these type of situation, especially when you're looking at I guess communication as a and I think the most important part of communication is listening. And I tend to sort of summarize it myself as listening to understand rather than listening to hear. So what I find is a lot of people tend to just listen to hear, but while they're hearing what the person is saying, they're formulating a response. So you're not fully present in what that person is actually saying, because you're wanting to, as soon as they finish talking, I'm going to say something, I'm going to respond to that. So that ability to be able to just really listen to understand. And I am still totally working on this huge part, because I remember, arguing with my mum growing up, and nothing would come of it because it was just like comment, build, leave the situation, you know. There was no real listening to try and understand where that person is coming from, and sitting back, and if you can pause and then actually take on board what they're saying, often your response is going to be less emotional. It's going to be more calculated. It's you might even write things down and write down what they're saying or write down what you're feeling, and you know, try to put it in a way like this. That comment made me feel this.
Yeah.
Because that becomes, you know, the way that you've said what you wanted to say, but you've said it in a less accusatory way. It's not like you did this to make me feel like this, and like you did this, you did that. It's less blame. It's more, well, that made me feel like this. No one can argue with how something made you feel.
Yeah.
And if you've come across in a way that is composed and calm, then ultimately that's going to go a longer way to resolving that in the short term.
It does a really quick way of diffusing a situation.
Massively.
And that's something I've really been working with myself. It's just like, like you could react. You could just keep going and then leveling up, and so there's this final explosion.
Yep.
Or you just take that breath and sit
Massively.
and think about what you're going to say.
And I it still happens with me where I'll just respond, and it could be, as you say, you might have had it could be Friday afternoon, and you had been a long week, and so your ability to logically, sort of remain rational is reduced because you're fatigued, emotionally, physically, and so you're sort of less. Your fuse is shorter, for lack of a better term. So for me, I've sort of learnt different times of the week or of the day that are less conducive to positive resolution. It's when you're in a relationship and you working through certain issues with, and this is friendships, it's partners, it's anything. Finding those and being honest about those is a huge part. So. I don't think anyone is perfect in that. So, but as long as you can sort of, as you say, that awareness is the biggest thing. Aware of these things that, and that's a constant growth element.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that thing is like every different person is on their own different journey.
Massively.
So then you've got to meet that person where they're at as well. And it's just like, if you don't, because then you're coming in and you're doing all this stuff and you're trying to tell them what to do, and you're like, then you're in a no better position. So you're like, okay, cool, like, let's have this conversation at this level for now, and then like hopefully we'll meet again and we'll keep going forward. And it's just like, you take all ego out of it.
Yeah, ego is a big one, isn't it?
I think you spoke to Jeremy, and like Jeremy talks about ego a bit, and it's just the same thing. It's like, take ego out of it. Yeah. It's just you and your stories, and whatever stories they're telling themselves. Yeah. So then you take your stories out of it, and you go, okay, cool, like let's have a chat.
Yeah, it's and that is difficult at times to be able to really to open up around that, and to because. Ultimately, I guess we're taught from a very early age, you got to look after yourself. You got to do what's best for you. You got to, and that is something that I'm really working on. I'm an only child, and it's interesting around the stigma and stereotype around only children is sort of that spoiled, everything about them. And I no way thought that I was a spoiled child, but I think what's been ingrained in me is that I put my own self first a lot of the time. And even that happens when you're an adult. People say, "Oh, you're on your own journey. You do you. You gotta go. Do whatever you need to do." But for me, it's probably really being more and more conscious of others, and trying to learn about other people, and that's I guess a growth thing for me that I'm continuing to try to work on. It's difficult, but especially like I teach 167 kids and coach upwards of 50, 60 adults. Yeah. And so you're spreading your own energy
to a lot of people.
To a lot of people.
And a lot of different personalities.
Yeah. Yeah. And for this year, this is the first year that I was senior coach of a footy club, and it's been a huge learning experience for me, just in terms of how much time I can put into different elements of my life. How much time can I put into that football side, work side, family, relationships and friendships, and I'll be completely honest, the balance has been off for me.
Yeah.
And that's something that's difficult to, I guess, take on board. But you've got to own that. You've got to be like, okay, well, how can I try and change that balance in the future? So it's a constant growth thing. I'm just trying to.
Absolutely, like especially that balance, like the life balance is just when you've got so many different like relationships, and and your own relationship, and you're like, when can I do stuff for me?
Correct.
It's just like, you definitely. It's a juggling act, and it's not easy. It's just being identifying, okay, cool, like, I've got this in a roundabout way. Yeah,
correct. And it's interesting, we had a lot of issues at the footy club this year, and it was, for me, it was things that I'd never seen before, and trying to sort of work with the club to work through a lot of different things. And we got to a point, I think, for instance, this showed me that sometimes more of a hands-off approach is better, because got to sort of 3/4 of the way through the season and we lost a game by like 10 goals, and the season seemed like it was over. We were like, oh, no, we're not going to make the finals now, a few players are injured, that type of thing. And I was just like, fuck it, let's go, and I'm just going to have some fun and try to really embrace, rather than sort of really, I think as the season builds on, you're sort of like, we're getting closer, I'm going to start to put more work in, spend more time doing this, take more time with my players, because I'm going to spend more time at meetings, and got to educate them, got to do this, got that, do that. And then it got to that point and I was like, stuff it, I'm just going to just try and have fun. And it was after we did that, we didn't lose a game until we just lost a final.
The reason why you started playing in the first place was probably to have fun.
Correct.
And just go, I'm actually really freaking enjoying this. Let's do this, boys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that sort of, that grew and grew and grew. And I think if you can apply that same ethos to your life, your day-to-day, everyone has a job, and everyone, it'd be great if we could all, be holidaying all the time, because it's, you sort of, but if you can, build those relationships with the people that you work with to make it an enjoyable place to be, work in a space that you sort of look forward to going to every day. For me, that's sort of, I mentioned the word success before. I was like, that's what bring about success. And then I could talk for ages about what is success.
What is success, and
and everyone has their own version of success, but always a driver for me has just been wanting to wake up in the morning and be like, all right, let's do this. I'm excited for today. I remember when I was like 18, 19, I didn't go to uni straight from school. I worked as a landscape labourer and a chippy labourer for 2 years, and worked at a timber yard. And I remember working at the timber yard with guys in their 50s and 60s who had been there for 30 years. And I was there 3 months, and I was like, get me out of here.
Well, that's it. I'm a carpenter by trade.
Yeah.
And I was like, there was one day I was just sitting in the lunch shed, and I'm like, looking around, there's guys in their 40s, 50s, just complaining, been doing it for 30 years. I'm like, I'm over this.
Yeah.
I'm not doing this anymore.
No.
And
I think it's all these things have to happen for you, and for every individual in their own way, to be able to learn. But it's sort of it sends you on, I guess, a different path when you get to that point. And I guess ultimately that's, I think, especially with the kids I teach, they feel the pressure of, I go to an independent school, my parents pay a lot of money, I need to be going down this path. I ask kids, what are you doing for year 11, year 12 subjects? Like, I want to do this, but my parents want me to do this. And that's what, as soon as that happens, you're like, how do you go about that? Or you can, and parents come to me and go, what do you think little Johnny should do? It's like, little Johnny, what do you want to do? Not like, what do I think? Not what you think as parents, but what does he want to do? Because, one of the great things that my mum always encouraged me to do was just, if you do stuff that you enjoy, you're going to do it well.
Yeah.
And I know that when I enjoy something, I know the amount of effort I'll put into that. But I also know when I don't enjoy something, my effort wanes. It goes down. So for me, it's just finding what can I enjoy doing regularly, and so hopefully you sort of start to get to the point where you can do that. So it just takes time.
It does. It's the way you're here. It's put on this planet just to try and work out your your path over your lifetime.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Yeah, like I've been sort of, I guess, thinking about when I was growing up. I remember my mum went back to uni when I was sort of in my mid-teens, and that's when I was probably trying to fit in. And I guess one thing I was thinking about before driving here today was my earlier self. And I was quite because I got bullied. I wouldn't say that I was ever a bully, but I was quite reactive.
Mm-hmm.
I had a bit of a short fuse. Someone would poke it and I would sort of react, which is ultimately what people want, and that's something I've sort of worked on to try to not to be. But I probably around my fear as a child was that being an only child, I used to spend a lot of time on my own. I used to kick the footy around in the court on my own, kick it to myself and that type of thing. And then when I went to I have sort of a few regrets about my high school journey, because I remember having a really close group of friends. Yeah. And that group of friends were, I guess, the outlying group. We used to go and play video games at each other's house on a Saturday night, and we played indoor soccer, and I remember that they were just happy. I remember thinking how happy they were. But I had this sort of need at that age to be one of the cool kids.
Yeah.
So I probably left that group to try and invest in these people.
Yeah.
Who I thought were the bee's knees, the cool kids, the ones who would. I thought they were the good-looking crowd.
Yeah.
They had all the girls interested in them, and if I hang out with them, then that'll be sort of what.
Yep.
How I'll be like that. And ultimately, as I got through my middle and end of high school and then into adulthood, I realised those people were not the type of people that I wanted to hang out with at all.
Mm-hmm.
They were, insecure, and they were bullies. They were people who just they were fearing their own inadequacy, and hanging out with that group was feeding that.
Yeah.
And then it got to a point, but I was just like, well, I'm not friends with I've lost this group of friends, and I don't want to be group of friends with them, so I'm sort of in the middle. I don't have that that point, and I sort of then started to realise that the quantity of friends really means nothing.
Yeah.
It's all about that quality of that person, and you start to sort of figure out the people as you go along, and people come into your life for a reason, season, or a lifetime, and everyone teaches you something, and you got to be able to take those lessons out. So I probably wish I look back on my childhood and say just sort of live with less fear.
Yeah.
I guess so. That it's and then now you sort of learn that it's okay to be on your own, and that you can survive, and then you can sort of beat to your own drum a little bit from that standpoint. So I understand it's such a huge balance, and I'm learning this balance because we talked about before, not being like that and thinking about other people more. But for me, I'm just trying to figure out, okay, let's get the scales right. So it's really interesting down that path. But,
so that's probably leading into one of my questions anyway. What would you tell you? Maybe 3 things you'd tell your younger self?
Yeah.
Is that one of them? Is just not to... Is that...
Yeah, one of them would be definitely around the fear. Because I was a very, I guess, fearful child, and there's probably an element that's still through with that as an adult. I am fearful of, probably the financial thing. I'm quite fearful of, just being conscious with my money, and that's got pros and cons. Fearful of huge change, but when I look back, and it's just about that, for me, it's that constant reminder and self-talk that things that I've done that have taken me out of my comfort zone have always ended up positive.
Yeah.
And that I'll be, if I try something and fail at it, it's going to be okay. Everything's going to be all good, and ultimately you're going to survive no matter what. I think, for me, it was just, I look back at my childhood, and I was, one thing I'm proud of is that I was really taught about respect. Growing up just with a single mother, who, just the two of us, and I was definitely taught about respect for women. And I think, when I look at men these days, there's obviously a large focus in the world and in media at the moment around treatment of women. Domestic violence is at the forefront of the media a lot of the times, and it feeds back into that fear for men of inadequacy and failure, and why do men do that? And asserting power and dominance. But I think that I have, through my teenage years, my mum was quite a feminist. But what that taught me was some real, and some, I guess, personality traits that'll allow me to be really conscious of how women feel. And I really get along. Like, I have friends who have partners. I really get along well with them because I feel that I, can really just sit down and listen and sit in a comfortable space. So I would definitely give some advice to sort of the young men that I teach, possibly not myself as a child, but definitely the young men that I teach around their treatment of women. And that's part of, I guess, a lot of the language that I use and I pull up, or call kids out on, is the language they use towards women and about women. And I think that last comment that I just made then, that's sort of a real thing for me, is a lot of men are actually quite good if there's women around, but when it's behind closed doors, when it's just the boys in a group and the language they use about women, and I'm going to be a bit of a bloke and show off a little bit, and that girl, or that, the derogatory terms and the way they talk about it, I think, it feeds into that pack mentality and that banter, and the I'm trying to be powerful and stand, hold myself in that space. So, and I think probably the last one is vulnerability, and I struggle with that now. Like you go through relationship breakdowns and heartbreak and change in career, and you build up this wall, build the bricks up to be able to close yourself off and protect yourself from any pain. And so for me, I am really just trying to not be like that as much as possible, and I would give that advice to young people and to myself, because I remember thinking that my year 10 girlfriend was the be all and end all, and when that ended, it was like, what am I going to do with my life? So I just, it's just that constant, just reinforcing to yourself. And then I would definitely tell my younger self that's not the be all and end all. It's that your life and you and where you're next going is going to be other people who you're going to meet and teach you lessons and take you in a different direction, and that type of thing. So
cool.
Yeah, it is interesting when you sort of I analyse all of the different parts of my life and the messages that you want to get across to people. There's a lot, but trying to streamline those down to be ones that are sort of that resonate with me. Yeah, I think that's the finding you. And I know you sort of talked about it a lot through social media and about finding your own voice and finding your why. And I'm still trying to do that, but it's sort of starting to become more clear.
It starts there once you start to think about it, and you kind of put stuff down on paper, and then like you said, you actually, when you start to write stuff down, and you actually, rather than journaling, how sometimes you just journal all your thoughts and just
and that has its positives.
It has its positives. But the days that you sit down and you write down, you go, okay, cool. Even just we've got downstairs on our fridge, we turned one of the doors on our fridge into a little bit of a goals board and our values board. And it wasn't until I was standing there and I was looking at it what do I actually really what are my values? And it's just connection and fun was two things that just really just instantly came up. And I hadn't really thought about it, but then it's also what this is. This is a connection, and
correct.
And it's how you were talking about with the footy. With footy, it's as soon as it loses, it's fun. It's just you literally. It's I remember when that's one of the reasons why I stopped playing rugby, because I just stopped having fun. Because it was just oh my god, we got towed up a couple of times, and I was just I'm just getting frustrated here. I don't like losing. I'm getting frustrated at my mates. There's just that fun element left. And I was just you know what, maybe it's time to pull up stumps for a while.
Yeah.
But
That's probably a nice reminder. I think that comment there was a nice reminder for me. Is just that's the reason why people play football at the heart of it. People might sort of, have different reasons. It might be for, like, I enjoy the fitness side of it and the challenge, and if you get paid to play footy, it's great. You might earn a little bit of extra money on the side, and you're like, okay, this is well positive. But ultimately, like, for me, someone can pay you as much money as you like, but if you're not enjoying it or you're not seeing some benefit, then you're like, oh, this is just, it's not going to last long. It's not sustainable.
It goes into any job.
Correct.
Anything
Exactly.
you do, like, if you're not, like, you can, like, you coming back to what you said, like, just being able to get out of bed in the morning and enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like, regardless of what you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
like making bread as a baker, building a house, going to a corporate job, if you're dragging your knuckles in there, you're not going to be enjoying it.
It's not sustainable, is it?
It's not sustainable, and ultimately, we are here for a short time, and you want to be able to enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this conversation, hopefully, and this type of project that you're putting together, and there's a lot of different ones down this sort of line. If collectively, as I said before, that us as individuals are some of our own, some of our own actions.
Yeah.
But if, as a society or as a broader community, if we're all a sum of our own actions, then the more people that just are talking about vulnerability and masculinity and what it means to be a man and all the things that we've talked about today, the more people that are doing that, then the better that is for the community, because not one person is going to come and change the world or the way we see it, or just probably quite I guess in the forefront of people's minds at the moment, based on recent events and people dying and suicide and male mental health. I know last week there was a huge talk about Danny Frawley and his mental health, his mental health battles, and there was a lot of media coverage and his friends within the media talking about his journey and their journey and how great he was. And, that's great. I think it's so important, but it's, can we sustain that? Can that conversation be still in the forefront? And that's difficult because obviously media and social media is just looking for what's the next story, or then what's the next story, or what's the next story. But if we can constantly bring it back and have those conversations, and for me, I'm lucky. I sort of feel that I am quite open to having these conversations with people, but there are people who aren't. Yeah, exactly. And that's because they haven't been taught how to, or they've never been exposed to it. So.
And I think you put up on Instagram the other day about the mental health plan. And that's what a lot of people don't actually realise. You can go to the doctors and you say, look, I'm feeling quite anxious and I'm struggling to sleep or whatever, and like I'd love to go and talk to someone about it. Yeah. And you get 10 free visits to a psychologist.
Absolutely.
And it's so good. Like at the moment, I've got a mental health plan. Yeah. Because I was battling some anxiety like 4 or 5 months ago. Yeah. And still, I go there now, and it's actually turned into a point of like a growth situation.
Massively.
Like, I don't have that anxiety's not there. Yeah. But I'm still using them to be able to then now go and go, cool, no, how can I now level up from where I was?
Yeah, absolutely. And continue to.
It's that snowball effect.
Massive.
And when I went there the first time, I'm like, holy shit, the world's caving in.
It's that, oh mate, I felt that when I've been there, been to myself, I was sitting in a waiting room just thinking, the walls are coming in, this is, why am I doing this? I need this, there's a stigma around it. And as you say, it's just about breaking down those walls and trying to change that stigma or stereotype. Because, I think what you said before, it's, I think it's pretty clear that male suicide rates are higher than female, and I think because women have this tendency usually to be able to talk about what they're feeling, as you say, or just sort of like, this is how I'm feeling because of this, more often than not, and men, we just sort of go, you can't cry as a man, you got to be tough, and that's what you sort of taught us. I remember my dad saying that to me, and so, but I was lucky that that my mum was sort of allowed me to do that. I would say that I'm quite an emotional person, and definitely not afraid to sort of to cry or to because I think that's a huge release.
Absolutely.
And to sort of, but for me it's showing others that that's okay. Which can be quite difficult because it's all well and good when you're doing it in the privacy of your own home, but the real sort of the term I was going to use is step to the line, and it's interesting.
Because
And like when we did the Tomorrow Man, we did the step to the line activity, where there was a scenario posed, and it was like, all right, would you do this in this scenario, or do this? And if you would do the more challenging one, or the one, and the scenarios were great. I can't remember too many of them, but they were just talking about that there was one response that everyone would have felt that knot or the butterflies in their stomach, and they just and you step to the line for that. And I use that analogy now with footy, is that, if you hear somebody talking about women in a derogatory way, or you see, any form of domestic violence, or you hear about it, stepping to the line is putting yourself out there to try and stop that, or to say that's not okay. I've been in situations where I've heard people say things, and I'm like, and haven't said anything. And that, but I'm trying to get to that point where I, more often now, as I get a bit older and feel a bit more confident in myself, I do say stuff, and it's that,
and it comes down, I think, like, even that, it's like, how do I get this out of it, hey, without going, that's
like, in an angry way, because that's not going to help anyone. You're right, and that's where that learning about communication is a huge one. And I think, I talked before about the education system. We're teaching kids content, but we should be teaching them how to communicate, and how to communicate with others, how to communicate with themselves, how to be emotionally vulnerable, and what does that look like. And I think we've got a long way to go, but I think we're spending a lot of time on the right areas. And there's a lot,
like you said, of people talking about it now, and if that snowball keeps happening and people keep talking about it, then it may eventually start to leach its way through everything else.
And I think my passion is helping the young men, and that, because I think hopefully they can resonate with me being a young man myself, and I'm sure you're in the same boat, and just trying to change that culture one sort of day at a time, one step at a time. And it's just it's good to, I guess, sit down and talk in these situations with like-minded people who have similar goals and ambitions, and just build that sort of community of that as time goes on, you can really have a group of people that are all pulling in the same direction, and trying to change that together. So I think it's really good. Yeah,
and that's like what Tom says on Tomorrow Man is like, we've got a bunch of little spot fires here, there and everywhere, people doing things. It's like getting everybody on a front, and just coming through with men's mental health, and lining up, and standing up and going, this is what we're all doing.
Correct.
As a collective, rather than a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here, a little bit there. Just everybody start talking about it and doing it.
And that's where that's where you got to put ego aside and be like, oh, my job over here, that's one part of it, but it doesn't really matter how I do. It matters how we do as a collective to try and build, as you say, a united front on trying to do that, because ultimately. And I say this in a football context, and in probably the context of this conversation, is that you can win together, but you can or fail on your own. As you say, an individual in a football team, one individual can't win you the game. You've got to be a collective group trying to pull in the same direction, and if you're all pulling in different directions, you aren't going to get that far. So I think we're trying to work down that path anyway. Everyone's got their little niche areas that they're trying to do, but the general goals are all pretty similar, which is great. So,
absolutely.
We
might wrap it on that.
Awesome.
Where can people catch you if they want to catch up?
I have. I mean, it's interesting. And this is probably an area for me, and it's probably a bit of a self-conscious area. Like from a social media standpoint, being a teacher, I tend to keep things relatively private from that. But I do post a lot of things around that to my particular group. A lot of the people I coach in footy tend to follow me and go down that path. So, I'm probably at that point where, this is the starting of the journey for me around trying to sort of build, the people that I speak to. And I talked about the numbers of people that I do at the moment, but, growing that is the next step, and we'll just see how we go. I'm sure if we're looking what the best medium for me or the best platform for me to be able to do that is, but hopefully I can just continue to speak to people like you on this type of forum, and I've had conversations, as you said, with Jez, just in private conversations, and start to work, because he's great at talking about this stuff, and there's so many people, and there's people at my footy club who are doing things around the Movember and looking at the masculinity side of things. So I'm just going to continue to try and work within my space at the moment and just see where that takes me.
Absolutely great.
And it's, as you say, just trying to figure out what it'll come to me, what shape that takes.
When it happens, yeah.
Correct. So we'll just see how we go with that.
Awesome.
I really appreciate you having me. It's been
Thanks
great. Awesome.
Mate. We have a special announcement to make. Due to the popular demand of our Janjuk yoga, surf and fitness retreat, we are doing another one up in Byron Bay, New South Wales in March 2020. So if you would like to be involved, head to the show notes, send us your email through the mailing list, update you with any of the updates that we'll be rolling out very shortly. We'd love to have you there, so make sure you join up. Well, that brings us to the end of today's show. If you like what you heard and want to get all the info, check out the show notes. While you're there, rate and review the show. And one last thing, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the upcoming episodes. Until next time, my friends, continue to look out for each other and continue to lift each other up.